There is arguably no bigger enigma in modern day professional wrestling than Danhausen. The man who is over 1,000 years old, the demon that lurks within the halls of nearly every independent wrestling show, and the character that was at one point one of the most talked about phenomenons in all of professional wrestling, even getting his own appearance on the New York Times Daily Podcast. Danhausen is one of a kind and always has been ever since he first burst onto the scene. And all of that plays into the fact of why he is also one of AEW's biggest fumbles. When Danhausen first debuted for the company back in 2021, it was met with so much hype and optimism. You finally had a character in AEW, a company that prided itself on professional wrestling first, that might be able to not only break through, but also show a different side of AEW, a more sports entertainment-y side that could help bring in not only a more casual and sports entertainment-oriented fan base, but also create some hilarious moments along the way. And when you consider the fact that he had prior established chemistry with much of your locker room, especially high-profile talents like Bryan Danielson or even CM Punk, there was so much potential for Danhausen to elevate the product and really show what he could do. This is not only someone who is able to play a great character on TV, but he's also a very underrated wrestler. Danhausen is not just the silly, goofy goober that you see on TV. He's so much more than that. He is an evolving character. When he needs to be funny, when he needs to get his money, he does what he needs to do. But when he needs to show a meaner side, he has been known to do that as well. And unfortunately, over the past 4 years, AEW has done very little to capitalize on it. And I would argue that outside of his first year with the company, they have done basically nothing. And some of this is due to injury. Danhausen did have an injury that kept him out of action for nearly a year. However, the fact of the matter is, they just didn't seem to be interested in using him. And even when they did, there were some rifts between himself and the company that led him to not appearing on TV. So it begs the question, why has Danhausen not worked? A character who is still making appearances on the indies, a character who made an appearance for Ring of Honor just far back as December, has not been used on AEW programming. You could point to things like maybe him having backstage heat. You could point to things like maybe them not having the creativity or the creative in place to try to put him on TV. But I would point the finger to one main issue, and that would be AEW's inability to adapt on the fly with AEW's ability to adapt on the fly. I think one of the unfortunate parts of the way AEW is booked is while some decisions and week-to-week matchups might be decided very quickly and on a very short timeline, I don't think that creative plans of having people on TV versus not having them are. I think that Tony Khan is a bit set in his ways about what he's going to be building towards over the next couple of weeks/months. And if it doesn't involve Danhausen now, then the odds of fitting him in at any time soon are unlikely. And that, to me, is a failure on the booking standpoint. And the fact that AEW was not able to make Danhausen work is a head scratcher, not only from a creative standpoint, but also a business standpoint. You can make the case there's no wrestler that has been able to monetize himself in the way that Danhausen has. And it's really astonishing. This is someone who, as a joke, got himself an A&W sponsorship while trying to make a case for AEW to sign him. This is a guy who goes and does nearly every single indie show, every single convention in order to maximize his profits. And Given his look, given his appeal, given his unique character, there's so much potential from a business standpoint for AEW to sell Danhausen masks, Danhausen paint set, a Danhausen cape. The possibilities were endless, yet they never really did any of that. AEW failed in something that they have consistently failed, and that is monetizing their talent and maximizing the business potential of it. This is not only true of Danhausen. You look at many of the masks that AEW have produced, they have not been at the par of what you would expect a premier wrestling company to do. Rey Fenix and Penta never even had masks that were sold on shopaew.com, and it wasn't until they both came to WWE where they immediately had that. And you could make the argument that AEW didn't have the infrastructure to do that, and likewise with Danhausen probably didn't have the infrastructure to develop capes in mass or develop a paint set or whatever. But I don't think that excuses their lack of business foresight. I think if you are legitimately trying to view yourself as a challenger brand and establish that, you need to be able to adapt and sell that merch and produce it, whether it's through whatever avenues you own, like Pro Wrestling Tees, or through a third party. You owe it to not only your fans, but you as a business in order to put these endeavors in place. And if you don't, then you're going to see more situations like Danhausen, where not only will it not work out from a creative standpoint, you're not going to be incentivized to put them on TV again because they might not be selling the amount of merch that makes it worthwhile to you. And it is a cyclical thing. If they're not selling merch, you're not going to put them on TV. And if you're not going to put them on TV, they're not going to sell merch. So point is, AEW missed the ball with Danhausen. But as far as Danhausen goes, he could go wherever he wants. If his AEW contract expired tomorrow, WWE would be chomping at the bit to try to monetize and make as much money as humanly possible with Danhausen, while at the same time using him in a way that is effective and that gets the fans riled up, which is exactly the way he should be used. And while Danhausen might not be in AEW as of right now, all of that could change on the fly. This is professional wrestling. But hey, I guess we'll see.